Hello and welcome to another episode of Sanely Insane. Alpha Otis Daniel Stevens was convicted of murder in the Superior Court of Bleckley County on January the 20th to the 21st, 1975 and sentenced to death. Stevens escaped from the Houston County, Georgia jail and sometime thereafter, on August the 21st, 1974, went to the home of Charles Asbell in Twiggs County, allegedly accompanied by another man. Charles Asbell was not at home at the time and Stevens broke into the house, where he located a .357 Magnum pistol which he loaded and a number of other weapons which he placed in a 1972 Dodge. While the burglary was proceeding, Roy Asbell, Charles Asbell's father, drove up in his Ford Ranchero. Stevens' later statement to officers was that Asbell said, "What are you fucking doing in my house?" and seeing rifles in Stevens' automobile, pulled his gun. Steven ran to Asbell's car, jerked Asbell out of the car, and hit him in the face several times. Asbell begged not to be hit anymore. Steven is 6'2" tall, while Asbell was 5 feet 6 inches, and at that time Asbell was crippled as a result of a tractor accident. Asbell usually carried several $100s on his person, and when he offered Stevens money in exchange for his life, Stevens took the offered money and kicked Asbell again. Stevens hit Asbell with the pistol, knocking him back into the Ranchero, and told his alleged partner to kill him if he moved. They drove approximately 3 miles to a pasture where they stopped, and Asbell got out of the car and tried to escape. He hobbled to an abandoned building being used as a barn, but Stevens took the .357 Magnum and ran after him. He took more money from Mr. Asbell and then placed the pistol in his ear and fired twice. Both bullets passed through Asbell's skull and exited at his right temple, causing his death. An autopsy showed that he sustained a broken jaw and several skull fractures. A trail of evidence connected Stevens to the crime. In pre-trial statements to police, he confessed this crime fully, as well as a string of other serious crimes which he committed after his escape before the Asbell murder. He presented no defense at trial. During the hearing on sentence, however, he testified that his partner fired the fatal shots. On December the 12th, 1984 in Georgia, Alpha Otis Stevens was to be electrocuted. The first charge of electricity failed to kill him, and he struggled to breathe for 8 minutes before the second charge carried out his death sentence. After the first 2-minute power surge, there was a 6-minute pause so his body could cool before physicians could examine him and declare that another jolt was needed. During that 6-minute interval, Stevens took 23 breaths. A Georgia prison official said Stevens was just not a conductor of electricity. William E. Vandiver. Paul Comiate Sr. on occasions drank to excess and became loud and violent. He was disliked by members of his immediate family, which included his wife Rosemary, his son Paul Jr. and his daughter Miriam. Paul Sr. had demanded that Miriam divorce Vandiver because of his criminal past and threatened to inform the police on him. Vandiver joined with the family in a conspiracy to kill Paul Sr. Pursuant to their agreement, several attempts to poison him were made without success. Finally, they decided to put him under with ether and inject air into his veins. One evening, Vandiver and Miriam waited outside the home for a signal from Paul Jr. that Paul Sr. was asleep. Upon seeing the signal, they entered the house and changed the plan at the last moment for lack of ether. Instead, they entered the bedroom intending to smother Paul Sr. and sprang on him in his bed. Paul Sr. fought hard for his life and yet another attempt at murder was bungled. Vandiver, however, terminated the resistance by stabbing him in the back with a fish fillet knife at least 100 times. 34 centimetre deep knife wounds were later discovered on the body. He hit him in the head 5 or 6 times with his gun, but he was still breathing. By Vandiver's own admission, decapitation was the immediate cause of death. Vandiver and the other family members then sectioned up the body while making jokes. Evidence was also presented that Vandiver had gotten a loan of $5,000 from Paul Jr. as well as $1,700 and Paul Sr.'s truck from Rosemary. At trial, Vandiver recanted his prior confessions and placed the entire blame on Paul Jr. for the murder and dissection. Vandiver waived appeals and was executed by electric chair on the 10th to 16th, 85 at 12:20 a.m. Eastern Time. He was the 72nd convicted murderer executed in Indiana since 1900 and the second since the death penalty was reinstated in 1977. The execution of William E. Vandiver. After the first administration of 2,300 volts, Vandiver was still breathing. The execution eventually took 17 minutes and 5 jolts of electricity. Vandiver's attorney Herbert Shapes witnessed the execution and observed smoke and the smell of burning. He called the execution outrageous. The Department of Corrections admitted the execution did not go according to plan. Stephen Peter Morin. Stephen Peter Morin was a serial killer executed by lethal injection by the state of Texas on March the 13th, 1985. Morin withdrew all appeals after pleading guilty to the 1981 capital murder of Carrie Marie Scott. Morin was later convicted of the killings of Jana Bruce in Corpus Christi and Sheila Whalen in Golden, Colorado. In the early morning hours of December the 11th, 1981 in San Antonio, Morin shot and killed 21-year-old Carrie Marie Scott in front of Maggie's restaurant, her place of employment. She interrupted Morin in the process of stealing her car. She confronted Morin and was shot. Morin said he never intended to kill Miss Scott. He pleaded with her to leave him alone, but then he said something came over him and the gun just went off, said Patricia Murray, a close friend of Morin's. Later that day, Morin abducted Margaret Palm from a local shopping centre. Morin and Palm drove all day and Morin ended up boarding a bus to Austin from Kerrville. Morin was apprehended in Austin, ending a 4-year FBI manhunt. Morin was a fixture on the FBI's most wanted list for a number of years. At the time of his arrest, Morin was a suspect in more than 30 violent crimes from coast to coast. Morin, a self-proclaimed born-again Christian, shocked the legal community by becoming only the second man in Texas history to plead guilty to capital murder. We discussed all the options. Stephen chose to plead guilty, and with the state's case against him, it was his best defense, said Peter Torres, Morin's defending attorney. Morin's newfound faith was significant in his decision to plead guilty and withdraw all appeals. Morin had no desire to fight his conviction or the death penalty sentence. Morin knew he was guilty and was accepting of whatever the judge thought he deserved. He was a changed man, and if the Lord wanted him to remain on earth or go home to heaven, Stephen was willing, said Charles Galloway, a friend of Morin's. Up until the time of his death, Morin remained a suspect in over 30 unsolved cases around the nation. He chose to remain quiet on those cases. Morin never discussed those cases with me until they came up in litigation, and even then he was unclear when discussing them, Torres said. Stephen was involved in an awful lot, but he told me he honestly had no recollection of any crimes he may have committed, Murray said. It is as though that whole part of his life has been blanked from his memory. Morin led a Bible study on death row and received a degree in biblical teachings. Morin looked forward to his execution date and served as an inspiration to the other inmates on death row. Stephen was prepared and referred to his execution as a graduation day, said Murray. We were the first to see Stephen that day, and all day he kept joking and saying this was a great day, Galloway said. Because of Morin's heavy drug use, medical technicians searched for nearly 40 minutes to find a usable vein during the execution of Morin. Morin was pronounced dead at 12:55 a.m. March 13, 1985, becoming the sixth man to be executed in Texas since the state began using lethal injections in 1982.